Yes, more about the history of Lithuanian board games, starting from us regaining the independence. First of all, I will ask for your forgiveness because, frankly speaking, I didn't prepare for this at all, because this presentation is actually a presentation which I happened to read at one of the Lithuanian youth centers back when I was a member of Lithuanian game developers, board member of the Lithuanian Game Developers Association. And second, I have this strange mental block when speaking in English, so forgive me for my very odd choice of words and occasional mistakes. Sometimes I am nervous and I am really glad to be here. So, the backstory of this presentation is as follows. My friend, and Agle's friend Richardas, who happens to be one of the main organizers of GameOn, he once asked me, when I became a member of the board, to systemize the publishers of board games in Lithuania. And I started that work, and I found lots of interesting stuff. And then I created this document, which is currently accessible online, and which I proudly but pompastically call the Antikythera of Lithuanian board games, their creators, publishers, and so on. And basically, it contains lots of information about the board game development starting from 1992. And if we want to think about the history of Lithuanian board games from that period, I think that it's best to think about it in tendencies. So one of the earliest Lithuanian board games, which currently has a bit of a legendary status, I would say, is called Businessman. And the tendency back then was to create lots of games that would be similar to Monopoly, because people were really fond of American stuff back then, of this idea of capitalism reborn, and but some of them had little access to the original Monopoly. And I would say that, ironically, that meant that many of these games were better than the original Monopoly. And one of those games, perhaps the most famous one, was Businessman. Actually, you can find this game in our museum of Lithuanian board games. And this is a game where you try to develop your business, you try to earn more money, but it has lots of interesting mechanical twists. I haven't played it myself. I know I am a sinner here, but Tadas Kastanauskas, who is also my friend, he actually was one of the main voices in a virtual thread at boardgamegeek.com, where people gathered together online just to try to recreate this game. So yeah, lots of people played this game, a legendary game. And another legendary game, which still is being played in Lithuania and is quite popular in some circles, is called Karma Game, or it's actually a sort of abbreviation of Kariai and Kariai ir Magai. So wizards, warriors and wizards, or warriors and mages. So back then, we had a really strong community of Lithuanian fantasy and science fiction lovers. And one of them happened to be Kastytis Beitas, who sadly has already left our plane of existence. But in 1992, together with Gediminas Beresnevičius, he created this role-playing game, which was sort of a Lithuanian version of Dungeons and Dragons. And it became so popular that it had, I think, three editions, if I'm not mistaken, released one after another, and you could easily find people even back then who would claim that it is better not only than Dungeons and Dragons, but it's also better than GURPS or Vampire the Masquerade and similar systems. And there was even a magazine released, so-called fanzine released periodically, dedicated to the world of this game. One of the striking differences, and again, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not lying right now, between Dungeons and Dragons and Karmagay was that in Karmagay, when a combat is happening, you can actually aim at a certain body part and lop it off cleanly. So lots of players loved it that you could kind of fulfill this a bit sadistic impulses. But yeah, two legendary games released at the same year, and then sadly we had a very long pause. There were board games released for children, and I know that really sounds arrogant, but they were not that creative, though sometimes their art was splendid. But lots of these games were just copycats of other known children games with little added value. And this pause took around 10 years. And then in 2003, we had a mathematician, a scientist called, and I think he was also fond of physics. He's an all-around very good scientist. This guy called Alvydas Jakeliūnas. And what was it? Yeah. And he released a game. In Lithuanian, the game was called just Pingvinas. It was released in a very small batch, I think around 200 units. But actually, people loved playing it. And the mechanics of the game were really simple. So you would have this map. The map would be created randomly from hexagon tiles each time. And you controlled a number of penguins. And as you moved, you would collect the tiles that you moved through. And those tiles, they contained fish. And so the player with the most fish at the end of the game would be the winner. It sounds really simple, but actually there was a lot of deep strategy in the game, because you could block other penguins' pathways. The amount of fish on each tile, well, not on each tile, but on tiles it would be different. On some tiles you would have just one fish, then two fish, and so on. And actually, later he met Günther Kornet, who is a German designer, and they cooperated to adapt this game to the international market. And to this day, I would say that this remains the most popular Lithuanian board game ever created, because it's currently being released, and in thousands of copies and thousands of copies sold by Fantasy Flight Games, which is one of the largest and best known board game publishers in the world. And it's really interesting because Fantasy Flight Games, they mostly release so-called Ameritrash. So Ameritrash are really heavy, large games with lots of rules, with a very prominent element of conflict. And then they release Hey, That's My Fish. And it's still being released by many, re-released by many other publishers. So what happened after this game? Then Another name that I also encourage you to remember is Julius Stonys. Julius Stonys was a member of Lithuanian fantasy and science fiction lovers community. And again, together with Babičius, in 2006, he released this game called Ardano Lobby. And I remember that back then I used to belong to this Fantastica.lt forum because the Facebook was not yet that popular in Lithuania. And this game, if I am not making a mistake, and if my memory serves, it was presented as one of the first serious, if not the first serious fantasy board game in Lithuania. Of course, aside from aforementioned Kare and Magai. Many players who played that game, they compared it to a mix between Dungeons and Dragons and Diablo, the computer game. So in this game, you would control characters who would go through dungeons. They would kill various critters, enemies, creatures. They would collect loot, and their task was to slay this giant dragon in the center of the maze, and then take a MacGuffin and get back. Of course, I shouldn't be very critical about this game right now, but I think that it didn't perform very well financially. However, it encouraged a lot of people to create their own prototypes and develop their own games. The main problem with the game was that it suffered from that syndrome of multiplayer solitaire, where people could not affect each other very much. But some people loved it. One of my friends, he still owns this game and plays it occasionally with his kids. So yeah, and that wasn't the only game released by GamesTime, which was a company formed by Stonys and Babičius. Another game was My City, Mano Miestas. And this game was actually, this game was created by Stonys, but it was not released to wide public. It was actually, he was hired to create this game by Litgrid. And this is, I think, the first Lithuanian Euro game. If somebody doesn't know what Euro game means, this is a genre, a very vast genre of board games where the main focus of the game usually is resource management, economy. You don't have direct conflict. You cannot eliminate other players. So when you think about, let's say, Settlers of Catan or Agricola or Le Havre or other games by Uwe Rosenbergs, those are Euro games. And this was the first Lithuanian Euro game. And what is interesting that Julius Stonys, he factually started 3 important trends in Lithuanian board game development, 3 tendencies. The first tendency was that of creating more Ameritrashy games. The second tendency was that of companies approaching game designers and hiring them to create games. And the third tendency was that of creating video blogs where a designer would tell about their experience whilst creating the games. I said that, and I suddenly understood that aside from Stonys, we don't have many Lithuanian board game designers that would tell about their experience. And Stonys has almost a course of short videos where he discusses his mistakes, what he has learned, and so on. So yeah. Actually, it's a sad thing because Stonys also has left our plane of existence. And if you have this GameOn magazine with you, there is an article which I have written, and it's dedicated to him because he was such an important figure when it comes to Lithuanian board game history. And then, again, there was silence and lots of alcohol. Because what happened after Mano miestas and Ardano lobiai is that Lithuanian publishers, they were, perhaps aside from Logis, they were not so confident about releasing new board games. They were mostly releasing books. We didn't have that many Lithuanian board game publishers, but some people, some creators, they discovered social networks, and they would print their own party games and then sell them through social networks. And some of the examples of such games are Dūzgės and Koma. And those two games, like Šotukas, if you know that game, a more recent game, they all are basically drinking games. So people would gather to play that to get inebriated, to get drunk, and some of those games also have some, let's say, erotic elements. But they're not that popular right now because we have more board gamey games. And in 2016, this guy entered this scene, Urtis Šulinskas, and I would say that Urtis Šulinskas is our national treasure because he is the most productive, the most famous, and the most, I would say, even creative board game creator in Lithuania. I didn't lie when I said that I think that, hey, that's my fish, retains its status as the most popular Lithuanian board game ever created. But I will also say that Jakeliūnas hasn't created many popular games since, and Julius has created, I'm sorry, not Julius, Urtis has created lots of them. So his first game was called Emojito, and it's a game where you have to, it's a cooperative game where you have cards lying on a table, and all those cards depict animals, sometimes mythical creatures with different smiles and mimics, and the players have to mimic their faces, and other players have to guess which card is the correct one. And the mechanic is simple, but it's very creative. And I would say that this is an attribute of all Urtis games, that they're very outside the box games. And this game was released abroad, became quite popular. And then another, there were lots of Urtis games, and they're also unique and unusual. For example, you have this game called Planet, where each player is constructed their own, well, planet, taking lands, which are magnets, and sticking them to a 3D shape. I forgot that word. It's not octagon, not hexagon, but yeah, one of these octaeder, yeah, one of these shapes, and it's also a sort of economical Euro game. And Urtis' most famous game is Hedgehog Roll, which I would argue would be the best if it had been a Sonic board game. It would have been the best adaptation of Sonic video game, because there in this game you have this this orb, which essentially is your hedgehog. It's sticky, you are rolling it, and you are trying to collect, well, perhaps not rings, but mushrooms and apples and stuff. And also there is a fox which is pursuing you. Why I'm mentioning this game as perhaps the most successful of Urtis creations is because it actually won Kinderspiel des Jahres, which is one of the highest evaluation in the world, which you can earn for your board game. So yeah, we have Urtis. He is still creating games. He has released, I think, around 12 of them. And then there was a very interesting, but I would say my favorite period of my favorite tendency of Lithuanian board game history. And that was a tendency of auteur games, sort of games released by teams of people who would gather to create that particular title because they had a very crazy, interesting idea, and we had an array of these games. So in 2016, there was a satirical game called Shamus, an Euro game where you had various fictional politicians, which you would try to push into the Lithuanian parliament. Of course, they were thinly veiled as real politicians, but people really enjoyed it, and even now you can see that in the museum, and still people are searching for this game and try to get a copy of it for themselves. Then there was another game, also with quite a national theme, called Baltų žemės, Baltic Lands, which had a more folk fantasy theme. It was a cooperative game, really similar to Forbidden Island and for Forbidden Desert. Another outdoor game is Perekupai, which I think is the most successful game created during Lithuanian/global game jam, because I don't know how many copies were sold of this game, but they're still releasing it and people are still buying it. It's a game which is really funny. It's perfectly illustrated. The theme is that of selling used bad cars in 1990s to customers who can be tricked. And even the authors were surprised at how successful this game was. Also a bit ironic is the fact that this is a board game and it was created during a game jam, which happens to be, and at that time even more was, a hackathon where most people would create video games, and still the most successful, or one of the most successful games created during game jam happens to be a physical board game. And this team slightly Magic Games, they released another game which was a satirical party game, which was created by myself, and it's called The Worst President. Essentially, it's just a game where you have to choose one of two really bad candidates which are formed by the host of the game. And yeah, it spurs all kind of political debates, and I think the highest praise for this game, which I heard, was from one of my friends, and she said that in her party, two people almost started fighting over it. Yeah. Then we have Cheesy Heist, and sadly I don't have another game in this presentation called Heated, but Cheesy Heist and Heated are games that are, I would say, alternatives to Uno. They are very fast, they have prominent take that element in them, and if you want a game where you can play it fast in around 20 minutes, the rules are simple, and you really can attack other players. Get one of these. And actually, yeah, we have a table dedicated to Heated next to the museum. I think it's whole. I don't know. I don't remember the number of 4 or 5, but yeah, go and try it. And two other games that I want to mention is Marijampolė and Ešopas. Marijampolė is actually a game which was developed by my co-worker at Sneakybox, Tomas Miliauskas, and his wife Monica. And this is again an economical euro game, though many players might get a vibe that it's a trivia game. But it's actually a game which manages to take history of Marijampolė and merge it into something that very Eurogamish, something very replayable, where you don't have to know anything about Marijampolė at all. I'll also would like to pay attention to this trend in global popular economical Euro games, that they very often are named after real locations. Like, for example, Carcassonne happens to be, I think, a castle in the south of France, and Marijampolė again is named after a location. And Ešopas, by the way, Marijampolė earned all possible awards. It was elected as the best board game at Lithuanian Game Awards. It's also won the best game title at PineCon, which is a yearly conference held in Druskininkai. And another Lithuanian Euro game, I played it, I loved it, was Ešopas, which the last year at Lithuanian Game Awards, it won the title of the best game. So, but sadly, Ešopas was released in a very small quantity, I think about 40 units, so it's kind of difficult to find right now. Now, if you are a board game developer yourself and you would like to release your game, there are essentially two paths that you may take. You may either release, register your company, release a game with your own money, something that Heated did, something that Ešopas did, something that Perekupai did. Or you can approach a publisher. And there are 3 publishers that can be approached in Lithuania currently, big publishers. One of them is Terra Publica, which is releasing board games yearly. They even released 2 of my games. Another is Kadabra. They are the owners of Hobby Shop, if I'm not mistaken. And one of their earliest game was a party/drinking game called Pats Baisiausias Žaidimas, but now they're back in the business and they want to release more Lithuanian board games, and actually they have. And another is Logis, and Logis publishes games for children, and they also translate these games into English and German languages. And you can meet them at Essen, for example, the biggest game festival in Europe. They're a very prominent and well-known company. And if you also would like to meet creators themselves of board games for a council, or just to chat, have a beer, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, you can go to Lithuanian Game Developers Association, or you can go to Prototypas Guild, which is a club of board game creators that gather each week, not each week, I think every second week on Wednesday at Alaus Namai, and they try each other games, because when it comes to board games, the most important part is testing, and testing again when you are creating it. And speaking about the events of where you can demonstrate or create new board games, there are 3 of those. Here you can see only 2: the Game Jam, the one where Perekupai was created. Then there is, of course, PineCon, which I also mentioned. Every spring in Druskinian Kai, splendid, splendid place, splendid weather. Go there, you can buy games, you can try other people's games, you can meet publishers and so on. And the third one is Lithuanian, which is a convent of Lithuanian fiction lovers. And now I think for like 4 or 5 years they had a contest of board game developers, for board game developers. So yeah, and thanks for your attention. That was quite a chaotic presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dmitrijus. And I can highly recommend, Dmitrijus, if you have any kind of questions about board game creation, also about game design, Dmitrijus is very experienced and talented and awards-winning Lithuanian game designer. So do we have any questions right now? Because we still have some time.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to ask, is it actually possible to find a copy of Karmage anywhere, like to play with your friends?
I might have misheard you asking whether there is a place where you can find Karmage?
Yeah, is there any possibility to find Karmage?
I think that there is even a website dedicated to them, but you would have to strive to find a group of people who would gather to play, as perhaps is the case with all role-playing games. But yeah, there are some people who still love this game, though I haven't played it for, I think, 37 years. That's my age. Yeah, I haven't tried it, but I also would really love to, because I've read the rules, I've heard very good things about it. So if you would find, I would gladly join you.
If I may recommend Fantastikos Mėgėjų Grupė on Facebook, where we have the fandom, somebody will probably be able to help you. Do we have more questions? Yes, thank you.
Thank you for an interesting lecture. When creating a game, we know that you have to test a lot, but what about the publishing phase? It's less spoken about. Would you like to tell us what were the most unexpected problems that you have faced during the publishing phase? Problems, issues, or just challenges you had to overcome?
Yeah, I think that actually Agle is a much more experienced person in this, because I will say this, that all the games that I have released were released through publishers. So the thing is that when you adjust an offer and you have tested your game, you are not meeting the main. You are basically you're not seeing the brunt of troubles that the publisher faces about the components, about finding who will print the game, about communicating with print houses, about creating art. So it's easier, but when it comes to publishing by yourself, it's really hard. I would say that. Yeah, am I right? Or
It really depends. It depends on the team that you have. If you have a team that is experienced, it's so much easier when you don't have to contact any external forces. But otherwise, it's a challenge with every publishing. You need to keep in mind what you can use in marketing and also cost effectiveness. So usually you go for something a bit less expensive and a bit less fancy when you publish. Do we have more?
I would actually add one problem that I personally faced and always face. has anybody here seen a movie called Monty Python and the Holy Grail? You know, there is that scene where they're reading the instruction for the hand grenade, and it repeats the same thing again and again and again. And now when I'm watching this movie, I'm thinking that it was created specifically for people who write rules for board games, because sometimes you would write rules and you would give them to a person to read, and then they wouldn't understand anything, and though it's clearly written, and then you would repeat the same thing like 2 or 3 times, and another person would read that and they would say, why are you repeating this? It's perfectly clear. So I would say that structuring the rules so that they are elegant, that they're easy to understand, and you know that they flow, and that the one who reads them does not feel kind of overwhelmed, that's the difficult part.
So you can see in the world that there is a trend to convert either video game into a board game. For example, Stardew Valley is always out of print, or converting board game into a video game. What about Lithuanian market? Like, are there already like talks or ideas to adapt either Lithuanian video games into board games, or to make them, I don't know, I don't know if they would be more accessible, or make Lithuanian board games into video format, for example, the same Businessman or the same Carnegie?
That's a really good question, and I think that's a question that's almost literally is worth $1 million, because success depends on how you answer it. What games should be that should be made? It's a coincidence, because a week ago I tried to contact Tag of Joy, and I said that perhaps there's something else, something extra that you can do with Monster Buster Universe, and actually translate that into a board game really well. But I would say this, that Lithuanian video game development studios, they are periodically contacting board game creators, because this is just an easy way to get some funding. You are adapting something that has clear rules, that is very well tested, and you are paid for it. So yeah, I know that there is one Lithuanian game which my acquaintance created a digital version of, just because he played a prototype and he was so enamored with the game that he created it. So I think that this trend will only grow. Thanks so much for your question.
Talking about vintage games, so yesterday I went through the museum of board games, and they all seemed interesting, just too bad you cannot touch them. Are there maybe in the future some efforts to digitalize, to scan those board games, to make them more available for the wider audience? Because probably some of them are not even already under fair use.
Yeah, actually, the games, when we were assembling our museum yesterday, one of my Facebook friends remarked that, oh, this is Lobby Oshkotai, we used to play that, and we loved it. And now I know that Tadas will try to, I don't know, he has a dream of re-releasing the Businessman. But, you know, I think that we are now in a very good spot, since the games that become popular right now, they tend to be re-released, and they expand, because more publishers come and they contact the original publisher, and then they localize the game and so on. We didn't have that set guidelines back then. So there are some games that can be still re-released, but that we can think of. But I don't know where their authors are, and you know whom the rights belong to. But yeah, that's also a good chunk of food for thought how to move into this direction.